Order. Order. We now come to the 10-minute rule motion. Jonathan Gullis.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill to make provision for increased fines for failures to comply with a notice under Section 215 of the Town and Country Planning Act 1990. We are incredibly lucky as a nation to have such a vast and well-documented history. A built history is our physical connection to the past and those who came before us. We particularly feel that connection as members of this House each time we walk through the ancient Westminster Hall. Whether it is the great beams that support the roof of that hall, or the narrow terraces and red brick factories of our industrial heartlands, all have equal importance. All must be protected. The law, therefore, must allow the courts the flexibility to punish those who seek to destroy our heritage. That is what I seek today through the introduction of this bill. Madam Deputy Speaker, some in our nation do not share our passion to protect and preserve our history. Rogue landlords and property owners are endangering the historic buildings we must preserve as a nation. This is a national issue, but I wish to use an example of a historic building in my own constituency of Stoke-on-Trent North, Kidsgrove and Tork to illustrate our plight. The once glorious 18th century Teapot Works, Price in Kensington, sits just outside the mother town of Burslem. The site is privately owned and has fallen into serious disrepair at great expense to the taxpayer of Stoke-on-Trent. Price in Kensington is a large complex of factory buildings situated next to the Trent and Mersey Canal and is a Grade 2 star listed building. It is of a national importance. It is the only such factory left in existence that demonstrates how the pottery industry evolved over time. Sadly, though, due to the actions of a rogue owner, most of the buildings are not safe for use. Damage is being caused by the systematic removing of slates and windows by the rogue owner, who are determined to do all he can to destroy this building, leaving them with a vacant site to sell for profit. A profit at the expense of our built heritage and of the taxpayer. The owners know that punishment for breaking the law in such a way is weak. They know they can get away with it. As well as removing structural parts of the building, the rogue owner has illegally let parts of it out to individuals under investigation for drug offences, human trafficking and the illegal disposal of hazardous waste. The site is regularly subjected to arsonists and thieves who seek to light the flammable material the owner has placed across the site. In October 2019, the condition of the historic front range of buildings, which sat directly adjacent to a strategic road, was collapsing. Despite notices being served on the owner to carry out repairs, the council had no option but to demolish this section of the building of the site, under the Building Act of 1984, and to seek compensation from the owner by placing a charge on the land. It was either this or having the building collapse onto passing traffic. This wasn't the first time Stoke-on-Trent City Council intervened at Price in Kensington. Most notably, over the past 4 years, the council's planning and enforcement team have launched numerous actions against the owners, all at the expense of the taxpayer. This House is aware of the duties placed upon local authorities by law to protect heritage assets. However, the responsibilities that rest upon the owner, especially an uncooperative owner, are not as they ought to be. This can leave taxpayers massively out of pocket. Sections 215 and 216 of the Town and Country Planning Act 1990 provide legislative routes for local authorities to act against owners who do not repair their buildings. If a landlord or an owner, as in the case of Price in Kensington, refuses to adhere to Section 215 notice, then the provisions laid out in Section 216 come into force. The failure to comply with this notice is an offence that can lead to a conviction and a fine. However, and here, Madam Deputy Speaker, we arrive at the crux of the issue, the maximum fine for this offence is a level 3 on the standard scale, meaning that it is a mere £1,000. If the notice is still not complied with, then the legislation allows for a daily fine of up to £100 upon a second conviction. The local authority can, alternatively, carry out the works themselves and place a charge on the land to recover the costs. However, in areas like mine, where land values are low, as is in the case of many former industrial towns and cities, this is not a financially viable option for the council. To demonstrate this, look at the figures. The cost of repairs for Price in Kensington are estimated to be well over £5 million. The land is only valued at £70,000. Last year, magistrates at North Staffordshire Justice Centre found Middlesex-based Charles Lewis & Co guilty of failing to comply with the notice issued by the City Council. Charles Lewis & Co were handed a £1,000 fine, a £100 victim surcharge and a £530 fine on council costs. A £1,000 fine? That's not even 1% of the site value. In such situations, like the one I've just described, the local authorities are essentially left with two limited but costly options. The first is an urgent works notice under Section 54 of the Planning, Listed Buildings and Conservation Areas Act 1990. This can only apply to repairs in unoccupied sections and related to weatherproofing and keeping the building safe from collapse. If the owner takes no action, then the council must carry out the repairs and invoice the owner. This is often converted to a land charge through the courts, meaning that the council and again the taxpayer is effectively left to foot the bill, letting rich property owners and developers off the hook. The second option is to issue a repairs notice under Section 47 of the Planning, Listed Buildings and Conservation Areas Act 1990. This notice requires the landlord or owner to carry out reasonable works to protect and preserve the building, notably if there is architectural or historical significance to the site. The council must create a detailed schedule of works, and if they are not carried out, the only option left to the council is to issue a compulsory purchase order. There are no other legal or financial penalties for non-compliance with this notice, and the works cannot be carried out in default by the council. These restrictions and meaningless punitive measures are often render local councils tied at the wrist, as the outcomes, as outlined in legislation, do very little to alleviate the finances and efforts expended during the process by the local authority. It is imperative that we increase the fines that can be levied on the owners who allow heritage negligence. Though Price in Kensington is the most damning example of this disregard in the constituency I serve, there are many other buildings in similar dilemmas across Stoke-on-Trent, from the Central Hotel in Burslem to Commerce Works in Longton. But there is not just an issue in the Potteries, it is an issue across the country. The successful passage of this bill will help hundreds of historic buildings which find themselves in a similar state to Price in Kensington. Take Burnbeck Pier in Weston-super-Mare, privately owned with an owner unwilling to cooperate. What about the Walton Works in Chesterfield, another Grade 2-star listed building falling into the ground as the private owner does nothing? The Pithead Baths at Lynmouth in Northumberland have laid vacant for over 20 years, whilst the commercial company wait for it to collapse of its own accord. Shuttleworth Hall in Burnley, a 17th century building, faces an uncertain future because the law lets the property owner off the hook. A £1,000 fine is much less than the cost of repair to these iconic and protected buildings. There are over 5,000 entries on the Heritage at Risk register. This bill will enable the relevant authorities to take action against those who destroy this nation's heritage. That is why I have the unreserved support of Historic England in my endeavour to see this law changed and our nation's heritage assets protected. Historic England agree with me that stiffer penalties are paramount to efficiency of local authorities and the security of our heritage. In addition, it was a pleasure to have the opportunity to make my case on this issue directly with the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government, the Right Honourable Member for Newark. And I hope that the Government will look to include this bill in the forthcoming Planning Reform Green Paper. Madam Deputy Speaker, our silence so far on this issue has been deafening. We must act and must act now to give the courts the powers to levy unlimited fines against those who destroy this nation's built heritage. I hope I will have the full support of the House for the changes I seek today.
The question is that the honourable member have leave to bring in the bill. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. If the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Who will prepare and bring in the bill?
Chris Clarkson, Mrs Pauline Nathan, Andrew Rosendale, Aaron Bell, Martin Vickers, Peter Gibson, Tim Lawton, Marco Longhi, Lee Anderson, Simon Hoare, Mr Andrew Mitchell and me, Madam.
Jonathan Gullis.
Planning, proper maintenance of land bill.
Second reading what day?
Friday the 29th of January 2021.
Friday the 29th of January 2021. Thank you.